What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Right now we're going to be taking a look at the Motorola Nexus 6. Man, this is one of those phones. Let me tell you a little story. When I had the Nexus 4, or maybe after the LG G2, whatever I had, the Nexus 6 came out, and this phone came out in 2014, and I'm like, man, I want this phone like crazy. And I think I had the Nexus 4 at the time, probably. Yeah, I had the Nexus 4, and I was looking at this phone. I'm like, you know what? I had a 4.7-inch screen on there. This thing had a 6-inch screen, or 5.96-inch screen, almost a 6-inch screen. And I was like, you know what? I can make that jump up. It's going to be worth it, this and that. And thank God I did not do that, because if I bought this phone at that time, my life would have completely changed, because I would have to carry around like a television screen with me everywhere. And that's no knock to the Nexus 6 or the Nexus line at all. I love Nexus phones. Even the Nexus 6, I have so much love for it. But man, Motorola and Google did not do us justice by dropping a phone this big. If this phone was like 5.5 inches or something, I feel like that would be like much better. But I mean, I guess they did kind of, help increase the size. I mean, this is probably as big as you can get without feeling like you have a giant screen, because this phone's footprint is more than like an iPhone XS Max. I think it's just the way the screen is set up. This one is way wider than the iPhone XS Max, so kind of a little funny story there. But we're going to take a look at it, see how it's held up and everything like that. So this thing, like I said, was released in 2014 in October, so this year will actually be its 5th birthday, if you want to say it like that. We got a couple more months until then, but yeah, I mean, this thing is going to be 5 years, and honestly, I'll be completely honest, this thing does not look 5 years old at all, because there's phones that were released in like 2016, even probably in 2017, that look worse than this phone. And I won't say this phone pioneered like the bezel-less trend or anything, but you can definitely see the small bezels on this thing and how most phones being released now have the same type of setup as this phone. So pretty crazy in my opinion. Like I said, I think the only thing they messed up on was the size. I feel like they just made it a 6-inch screen just for the name of the Nexus 6, just like how the Nexus 7 had a 7-inch screen. Kind of the same thing here. So we also do have front-facing speakers, and those really held up. I mean, even now there's a lot of phones that don't even have front-facing speakers, so that's definitely a cool little thing they added. The screen is 1440p, so it's going to be pretty decent. I have seen a lot of complaints about it being a little pinkish. For my specific unit, I don't really see it. I think the panel looks pretty decent. The PPI is 493 pixels per inch. It's not low at all. It's actually pretty high, and I do think that the panel itself is pretty decent. For some reason, the phone just doesn't feel that premium, in my opinion. It's mostly built out of plastic, so that kind of has me feeling a way of like it's not that premium of a display or anything like that, but the panel itself is decent. But the whole entire build of this phone isn't that good. On my specific unit, there's a lot of creakiness going around. There's no fingerprint sensor either, so that kind of sucks. On the bottom, you have a micro USB port, and on top, you have the headphone jack right in the middle of the phone, which I've never seen that. I don't see that too often. It's kind of funny. And yeah, that's pretty much everything on the outside. Not much, is going to change on the outside of a phone. Looking forward, this phone isn't timeless, but it definitely has held up quite well compared to like a lot of other phones released in 2014. Now, in terms of software, this is kind of interesting. So it started off on Android 5.0 Lollipop, and it was upgradable to Android 7.1.1 Nougat, and that's pretty much where it's ended its life cycle. But what I can tell you is this phone is a Nexus phone, so there was a pretty large community behind it. You're able to root it and custom ROM this thing. There's a ton of Android Nougat ROMs, there's a ton of Android Oreo ROMs, and I've seen a couple of Android Pie ROMs as well. And I think if you're going to buy this phone, you should definitely, I would 100% recommend you updating it and custom ROMing it and rooting it, because you'll be able to get so much more life out of this phone if you were to do that. I guess Android Nougat isn't completely horrible, but you are like a couple years behind in software updates. Plus we have Android Q coming out, so you're almost better off just custom ROMing it and getting way more features that way as well. Now, looking inside of the phone in terms of the performance, let me just tell you the specs and then I'll kind of elaborate further. This thing had a Qualcomm Snapdragon 805 chipset, a quad-core CPU, an Adreno 420 Blazed GPU, and 3 gigs of RAM. And the performance of this thing is kind of iffy in my opinion. Now, if you keep it stock, I didn't put a custom ROM on it. I think the performance you'll get is decent. It's not horrible by any means. I guess it'll take you from point A to point B. Sometimes it does seem a little glitchy. Like, it doesn't seem glitchy, it just seems like it takes a while for it to do something, like to load an app or something, which is kind of interesting because this thing had 3 gigs of RAM, which is kind of a lot for a 2014 phone. So I figured it would be able to handle it, and I guess it does. Like I said, it takes you to point A to point B, but it's not blazing fast. Even on stock Android, I was expecting it to be better. It's a little bit slower than the Nexus 6P and the Nexus 5X than I expected, but I guess it's not horrible. Like, multitasking and everything is fine. I think it might have something to do with the big screen and having to push all those pixels. that could possibly be it. But I guess other than that, I mean, it'll get the job done. The one thing that surprised me was actually gaming, but more so the heavier intensive gaming. But the lighter gaming like Pew Pew and Temple Run, whatever you're going to do with it, those games run perfectly fine. Surprisingly, Paper IO, which isn't even that heavy of an intensive game, that game didn't really run that well. It was kind of stuttering everywhere, and that could possibly have to do with like the hardware inside, but it could also be because of the screen, because the screen is so big, you know, and maybe the specs inside of this phone couldn't necessarily power a game like that at that large of a scale. I don't really know, but Paper IO isn't even that intensive of a game, so I don't know why it was stuttering that much. It was kind of weird. And I guess heavier intensive games like Real Racing 3, they also stutter as well. You can definitely play the game, but I feel like it's just kind of whatever. Like, it's nothing earth shattering. There's noticeable skip frames here and there. So what I'll tell you is overall performance is kind of decent. I mean, it's kind of average in my opinion. It's not going to blow you out of the water, especially you have to remember that the games that are being updated, they're being updated through the App Store, so they're kind of basing the performance and graphics of those games on the newer flagships and not necessarily on the older flagships. So you kind of have to keep that in mind when you buy a phone of this caliber that still isn't the best in gaming, I guess. But I guess everything else is not horrible, and so I guess you have that. Now moving on to the camera. Okay, this thing has a 13 megapixel sensor on the back. It has optical image stabilization. You can shoot 4K videos on it, so that's pretty cool. But I think overall, I mean, the camera on this thing isn't that great. I guess it's like okay, like it'll get the job done, but I don't think it's like very good. I don't think it might even be a little bit below average. The settings within the camera, there's few and far between. There's not a lot of settings either. No like portrait mode or anything. Now the Play Store, the Google Play Store, does have a lot of apps within it that can really expand the functionality of the camera. But I mean, other than that, the camera quality isn't really that good. You do have like a dual tone flash, like a flash ring around the camera, which is pretty cool. I like that a lot. But I think as a whole, the camera quality could have been better. Again, I think the Nexus 6P was noticeably better. The Google Pixel obviously was way better. And I guess the Nexus line, even up to the Nexus 6, they were kind of prone to not having the best quality of camera, which kind of sucks because the Nexus line of phones were pretty good. But then this thing was dropped and it kind of, you know, was the same old, like, oh, the camera quality's not that good. So in this case, I would say the same thing. The camera quality could have been better. But you can see from the camera quality from the screen of whatever I'm filming, it's not the best. And this thing, I don't know why they did this. They have 2 megapixel camera on the front. They could have done way better on that, but it's not even that good either. So I'll tell you the camera quality is maybe a little bit below average on this phone. It'll get the job done. It can take photos, but it's not that good of a camera in my opinion, especially going in 2019. Now the battery life, this is kind of interesting. And I don't know how to phrase this, but this thing had a 3220 milliamp hour battery, and this phone was massive. I feel like they could have put a bigger battery size of it. I mean, the iPhone like 10R has a bigger battery than this, but this was back in 2014, so I'll give them a slide for that. But I'll definitely tell you that if this phone had the full 3220 milliamp hours left, then that'd be awesome. But this phone is running up onto 5 years now, and the battery size, the milliamp hours inside of it probably isn't the full milliamp hours. It's not 3220 anymore. It's probably like 2500 or 2600 because over time batteries do depreciate and they degrade. So this phone probably doesn't have the full size battery inside of it anymore, and that kind of sucks. So I'll definitely say that in my unit, the battery life really isn't that good. Even standby time isn't that good. I was surprised. If I took my usage that I do every single day on my iPhone 10, and I'm usually able to end the day with like 20-30% on my iPhone 10, I will probably end up having to charge the phone by the end of the day. But this phone does have Qi wireless charging, so that's super cool. So I guess it's kind of like if you should just drop your thing on a wireless charger and be set, then I guess that's it. But I think overall, this phone's battery life isn't really that good. If you're buying it used and like the person had it since like day one, it's probably not the best battery life. Now, some other notable things to note, like I said, this thing has a pretty large screen on the front. I mean, this phone is bigger than you think. It's quite a bit bigger than a lot of the phones being released now, so kind of funny that they did that, like I said. But this thing also has front-facing speakers, so that's super cool. It does also have a LED blinker on the front, but for some reason, sometimes it doesn't blink, like it doesn't show you notifications and stuff. On my unit, it sometimes doesn't and sometimes doesn't. But if you flash a custom ROM, you can actually enable that, so that's one huge thing I would tell you to do. Micro USB on the bottom, no IP67 or IP6, whatever. There is a little bit of water resistance on it. It doesn't tell me if it's IP certified or not, but it does say it's water resistant, so that's good. No fingerprint sensor either. Now, would I recommend the Nexus 6 in 2019? This is what I would say. Okay, if you currently have it, then you made it work for you. Congratulations. I would keep it for a little bit longer if you want. But for those small minority who for some reason just need to get this phone, or they need a Nexus 6, or they need a humongous phone, I would say get this phone, but you have to custom ROM them. man. You have to. I mean, you don't have to. I'm not forcing you, but if you want my approval on this phone, I would say you would just custom ROM this phone. That's probably your best bet. You're getting all those features. You're not even that outdated. The performance of this phone isn't the best, but I'm sure if you flash a custom ROM, you can tweak the performance settings a little bit. Or if you flash a custom kernel, which I would recommend, you'll be able to gain a little bit of performance and a little bit, I guess, a speed boost and everything out of it. Plus, you're getting all those features too. So I'd probably recommend you doing that. But for everyone else, I mean, I would kind of steer away from this phone. I think it's just too big for the average person to use. There's a lot better phones out there that kind of give you a similar experience. I would even recommend a Google Pixel over this. Now, I understand the Google Pixel is a little bit more expensive, but you will honestly have a much better experience out of that, a much better camera, a fingerprint sensor. You're not really giving up too much. I mean, you're still getting the AMOLED screen. You have more updates in the Nexus 6, and they're kind of in the same league. Like, they're all kind of brothers in a way. So I'd honestly recommend a Google Pixel over this thing. And like I said, the Google Pixels aren't even that much more expensive than the Nexus 6. I think those are around like 160, where the Nexus 6 is probably around 100. So what I'll do is I'll link a Google Pixel in the description below, and I'll link a Nexus 6 in the description below if you want to pick that up for some reason. Both those links will be the first links down there. So make sure you buy it through those links, because every single time you buy something through those links, a little bit of revenue comes back to the channel. It helps us do more videos like this and do more giveaways and things like that. So it don't mean so much if you guys can help us out there, but that's pretty much it. That's pretty much my opinion. If you guys want to leave your opinion in the comment section below, what you think about it, do you think the Nexus 6 is still worth it or not? Let me know in the comment section below. But hit that like button, that'll mean so much. But definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys can hit that. Also, check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those links are linked down below. I'd really appreciate if you guys could check it out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.